Well, welcome to part 2 of this wing construction. As you can see, this has now been completed, the lower half at least, by shuffling back and forwards on the board, and I've scarf jointed the leading edge, the upper spar and the rear spar. So without further ado, let's get those glued in. A little bit of glue. I'm going to use a combination of white glue and CA for the leading edge and white glue for the main spars. So let's get a little dollop of glue in each one. They're a really snug fit, which is great. It's what we're looking for. It's a mark of a good kit, and if you're scratch building it from a plan, it's a mark of careful building. You can't really make up for bad joints with glue. If you do ever get a bad joint, I always stuff it with balsa. Put a wedge in so it's a tight fit, and then C8, and then the balsa becomes one, and it hides your mistake. Now that part of the wing's overhanging the board, but it'll be rigid enough to place this in. Make sure the scarf joint's in the centre because a brace will support that. And there we go. Just realised I haven't lined it up on the centre. That would make sense. There you go. That's better. There you go. I'll repeat for the others. The spars have been put in place, the leading edge next, but before I do that, I've glued in this plywood brace. It's a little bit awkward because you have to cut out a slot for it. It would have made more sense, I think, perhaps to cut it before they were glued in, but that's done now. I managed. Needs must. And there's a little brace to go here, and obviously that supports where the scarf joints are. So I'll apply some glue along the edge, and then I'm going to clamp it in place. It just sits on top of the capping strips, and these little clamps are invaluable for this sort of job. I think they'll just about reach far enough down. Yeah. There you go. Now, there's a trailing edge to glue on and the leading edge. And when it comes to the leading edge, I'm going to use CA, and I'm only really going to zap the top part of the bird's mouth cutout. When I flick it over, I'll glue the bottom half, because this lower sheeting on the leading edge still needs to be curled round and glued in place. Right, let's go for it. So, this is the way to do it. Offer it up like this, and then holding it in place, I'm going to run some CA into the joint. And just to get it going, I should really have zapped it, but never mind. Well, that's glued. I'm going to trim the end off, because these get blocked. You can replace them, the cheapest chips. They get blocked and you just simply nip the end off. I'll just pause while I do that. I'm simply holding it in place now. I'm not necessarily going to do every one straight away. I just want to hold it in position, then I'll go over it again. In fact, I'm going to get the kicker. That sort of helps things along a little bit. There you go, job's a good one. Just to hold it in place, and then I'll go over the whole thing, checking as I go along. I'm conscious that I've missed a one out there, and as I say, I'm not too worried about that at this stage. I just want to get it in place. There we go. It's quite a difference between the upper wing and lower wing in terms of the leading edge. This is much beefier than it was on the lower wing for some reason in the design. Now, when it comes to gluing this trailing edge on, the recommendation is that you only glue to the ribs and not the trailing edge. And the reason for that is that the trailing edge needs to be scalloped out. Now, the scalloping is often overdone on models. It was a result of a wire trailing edge to save weight, and as the dope shrank the fabric, it pulled the wire in to produce quite a gentle scalloping, not a massive over the top that you might find on some sports models. Anyway, I'll finish gluing the leading edge on, and then we'll pay attention to this trailing edge. Now, before I turn my attention to this trailing edge, the lightning holes in these ribs, at the point at which the wings are attached to the cabine, it would make sense to me if they were strengthened. So what I'm going to do is, I've kept the pop-out bits, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to glue them back in. Why not? Now, I'm not using C in case I get it slightly wrong and we can't get them glued in, so I'll put plenty of white glue on. And then I'll put these pieces back in. Yeah, fit nicely. Sorry, I have paintbrush in my mouth there. They fit nicely, so obviously I need to leave that one open for the servo wire, but I can't strengthen, to get all the bits out, I can't strengthen these bits. It makes sense. So there's the rear one, and I'll add a little bit of glue to that. And the struts, the wing struts that are further up, I'll do the same at that rib. Just seems to make sense to me. There you go. If I thought about it, I could have just left them in and then CA'd around them to seal the joints, but that'll do the job. And I'll find the forward one. It's not that. Like a jigsaw puzzle without the pictures. That's it. That's the one. I was watching, while I was doing modelling, I was watching a live video feed of the Western Superman model show yesterday. Goodness me, the heavens opened. I think it didn't ruin the day for people because they seem to have started up again later on. For all those brave souls that went, I hope you enjoyed it. With a bit of luck, we'll get some flying in the northeast at some stage. I'm going to have to go back on the simulator to get my hand in. I feel like I've become rusty and with not flying. Right, I'll crack on with this and then we will come back for the trailing edge. There you go. I hope you can see that I've put the lightning hole pieces back in, and that's going to strengthen up the areas where the cabane struts here and the wing struts here will be attached in a moment. Right, it's time to add some surface sheeting, and when you're doing a sheeting area like this, one technique which is very effective is to apply glue to the area you want to sheet and then use heat to reactivate it. Now, for some time I've used this technique on plywood, but I thought that the insulation properties of the balsa would prevent this from working, but I have found out after watching Cliff Harvey use it that it does work. So here we go. I am, for the leading edge, putting the PVA or the white glue on neat, but I'm going to use the iron to reactivate it on the ribs. So glue on here first. I'll put this all the way along the edge and then we'll be ready to put the sheeting on. So I'll pause while I'm putting this on and then come back when we're going to actually use the iron. Okay, I've applied the glue to the leading edge. I'm just pushing that into position, and now I'll actually start here. I'm applying some heat and hopefully this will reactivate the glue on the ribs. Well, that's not worked. Bit more heat perhaps. Yeah, it needs more heat. Now it's working. There we go. More heat required. You need to keep it on until the heat passes through, and then it's sticking the sheeting down. Works really well. I'll have to go obviously all the way along the wing, and then when it's done we'll come back. Here we go then. The sheeting's now been added. I've unpinned it from the board. Now, when you put the leading edge lower sheet on, you just glue it flat, but it needs to be bent round and glued to the leading edge. So to do that, or to help it along, what I'm going to do is just dampen it and see how that goes. And if that doesn't allow it to bend round, I'll add a little bit of steam. But I suspect the dampening alone will probably be enough to achieve what I'm after. It's gone together nicely. The next thing to do after this task is to add the webbing between the upper and lower front spar, and that's something that I do even if it's not shown on the plan. It makes for an extremely tough wing, and more importantly perhaps a wing that doesn't twist or warp. Now I'll show you that. It's quite a laborious task. It's not the favourite thing to do because it's very repetitive, but I will show you the key to it. And the key, of course, is that you use the grain vertically, because that's where all the strength lies if you use it like that. So I'm going to put this on, leave it for a couple of minutes, and then we'll come back and see how easily this will bend round. I'm going to use CA in this case to glue it, because I don't want it looking like a porcupine full of pinholes. I just want to pull it round and zap it because I can actually get into it from the inside. So we'll leave that a couple of minutes and come back. That's done the job nicely. Doesn't need steam. So all I want to do, I manoeuvre it around, is to run some CA along this joint. I'll do the front of the sheeting first, and then I'll go inside and pull it round. So just pull that round. So this is going to be feathered away when it's sanded to shape, the leading edge. So that'll do the trick. And I'll go all the way along like that. Then run some on the inside. And then we'll turn our attention to the webbing. Pause it there. Well, here you go. You can see there that I have the balsa in the correct orientation, grain running vertically, and I'll simply, the sheet is sitting on top of the capping strips. Mark off, and I'll repeat that all the way along the wing. It's the grain this way that adds the strength and the rigidity to the webbing. So I'll cut those out and glue them on. And the last thing that I'm going to do on this video, I think, is put the tips onto the wing. I'll put the ailerons on next time. Let's see what it looks like when it's done. Here we go then. I've cut some of the webbing pieces out. Notice the grain. And I'll simply apply the glue so that it sticks to the upper and lower spars. Simply put it in place, push down to the capping strip, and then I'm going to clamp them in place. And I think I'll have to do the same on the lower one. And you simply work your way along like this. And as I've said, there's an enormous advantage in doing this. It adds dramatically to the strength of the wing. Just checking that that's a fit. Yeah, that's fine. It adds enormously to the strength of the wing and adds very little weight. And even if the plans don't call or don't show webbing like this, it's something that I always tend to personally add myself. So there we go. I'll do this. It's quite laborious watching me sticking these in, so I'll do this all the way along, and then when that's done we'll do the tips, and I think we'll call it a day at that point. And the next session we'll actually look at putting the ailerons in and locating the hatch for the servos, and that'll be a video in its own right, I think. But the basic build of the wing, of the upper wing, is now complete once I've done this in the end tips. So I'll do this. Once it's dry, we'll do the tips, and then I think we'll call it a day. I hope you can see here that the webbing has been added, and that adds enormously to the strength. And what I'm doing here is adding the capping strips. And the reason I'm showing you this, there's nothing really very exciting about it, but it is an example of where the best glue or solvent to use is definitely CA. If you didn't use CA, you'd be using a white glue or aliphatic glue, and then you would have the situation of having to pin this down, and that would be a real mess in terms of pins. So what I do, a little bit of CA applied with an applicator like this. A steadyish hand helps. There we go. Fit in. press down, job's done. So I've got half a wing to do now, and then that'll be all the capping done and all the sheeting done. I'll cut the tips off, we'll add the tips, and then we'll call it a day with this video, as I think I've already mentioned. And then the next one, the final part, will be the installation of the servos for the ailerons and actually building the ailerons themselves. So I'll crack on, finish this, and then we'll do the tips. Right, so let's finish this job then. So I need to remove the surplus here. Here. And the last piece here. Right, here's the tip. Now what it does need is a groove cutting in here to fit into there. And it's angled. It doesn't go straight across, it's angled at a slight angle. So I'll do that. See how much I've got to remove. A little bit more. Actually, I'm going to take a little bit off this end. There we go. And let's see, I hope you can see that. It's at a slight angle. That's what I'm aiming for there. And then there are two other parts. That support it. Just check this one. Yep, that works. I need to just trim off the excess glue here. Sorry, you were out of shot there. There we go. So, I'm going to use, to glue this on, I'm going to use a thicker CA. Of course, it could be glued with any other adhesive, but I like the idea of this hit, getting it right first time. And it works with a kick of this. Done. I managed not to glue myself, which is always a good sign. These strengtheners. And there we have a wing built. As I say, I think I'll make a separate video so it doesn't get too long on the installation of the building of the ailerons firstly. And once they're built, we'll also look at installation of the servos push rods. Yeah, and I will show that little trick that a subscriber mentioned about using a chain to pull the lead through, and I'll give him some credit for his idea. I'll look up his name so I can do that properly. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed that journey up to now on the building of this wing. The tips are the final part to do. And there we have it. Really rather nice, and we'll crack on and finish this off next time. Thanks for watching. Please give it a thumbs up. Subscribe if you haven't done so you can join in the fun. Let's get creative, folks. Bye now.